Friends, we are from VIT University and we have taken few topics from theory of computation as a part of our assignment. Today we'll be discussing about Chomsky hierarchy, context-sensitive grammar, linear bounded automata and undecidability and decidability problems. First let us know what is a grammar. A grammar is a four-tuple system which contains VT, VN, P and S, where VT is nothing but the terminal vocabulary, VN is the non-terminals, P is a set of production, that is rules in the grammar, and it is finite. And it is in the form of alpha gives beta, where alpha and beta belong to VN union VT. And S is the start symbol, or also known as the distinguished symbol. And P must include at least one rule, that alpha gives beta, where alpha gives S. Chomsky hierarchy was described by Noam Chomsky in 1956. Hierarchy of grammars is as follows. Type 3 is subset of type 2, which is subset of type 1 and which is subset of type 0. There are four types of grammars. One is regular, context-free, context-sensitive, recursive, enumerable. The rules of the regular grammar is as follows. A single non-terminal should be on the left-hand side. A single terminal possibly followed by a single non-terminal on the right-hand side. To generate the regular languages can be decided by finite state automata or can be obtained by regular expressions. Type 2 grammar, also known as context-free grammar. The rules for this grammar is as follows. A single non-terminal should be on the left-hand side. A string of terminals and non-terminals on the right-hand side. To generate the context-free language can be recognized by non-deterministic pushdown automata and theoretical basis for the syntax of most programming languages. Type 1 grammar, also known as context-sensitive grammar. The rules for this is as follows. Alpha and beta may be empty. A is a single non-terminal and gamma is a non-empty string of non-terminals and terminals. Type 0 grammar, recursively enumerable. It is unrestricted grammar, that is alpha gives beta. This can be recognized by any Turing machine. Let us consider this language. Now let us apply all the four rules which we have learned and let us see this language is of which type of grammar. Now if we apply this rule, we can by easily from this language we can see that this rule can be applied, which means this is nothing but the type 2 grammar. Now let us consider this example. If we apply this language rule to this one, we can easily know that this is a type 1 grammar. Now let us find out why do we use the Chomsky hierarchy. We use this because it imposes a logical structure across the language classes and also provides a basis for understanding the relationships between the grammar. The syntax of most programming language is context-free. The common strategy of all the programming languages is a relaxed CF parser that accepts a superset of the language, and invalid constructs are filtered out. Now moving on to context-sensitive grammar. A context-sensitive grammar is a four-tuple system where G gives N, sigma, P and S, where N is a set of non-terminal symbols, sigma is a set of terminal symbols, S is a start symbol for the production, P equals to finite set of productions. The language generated by context-sensitive grammar is called context-sensitive language. Context-sensitive languages are a big step up from the context-free language in terms of their power and generality. Programming languages contain non-context-free features, for example, typing, scooping, etc. But all these fall comfortably within the realm of context-sensitive languages. Natural languages have features that can be captured conveniently by context-free grammars. However, it appears that NLs are only mildly context-sensitive. They only exploit the low end of the power offered by the context-sensitive grammars. Now moving on to linear bounded automata. The formal definition for LBA is that it is a non-deterministic Turing machine. That is, M equals to Q, P, gamma, delta, F, Q0, T and R. where Q is set of all states, P is set of all terminals, gamma is set of all tape alphabets, and delta is set of transitions. F is a blank symbol, Q0 is initial state, T is accept state, and R is the reject state. We have two types of problems in LBA. One is halting problem and the other is emptiness problem. The halting problem is solvable for linear bounded automata. Our argument here will be based upon the number of possible configurations for an LBA. Let's assume that we have an LBA with one track, K instructions, alphabet of S tape symbols, and an input tape which is n characters in length. An LBA configuration is same as that of the Turing machine configuration and consists of an instruction, the tape head's position, and the content of the tape. That is all. We now ask how many different configurations can be there. It's not too difficult to figure out. With S symbols and a tape which has n squares long, we can only have S to the power n different tapes. The tape head can be on any of the n squares and can be executing any of the k instructions. Thus, there can be only k into n into s to the power n possible different configurations for the LBA. That is written to a technique we use to prove the pumping lemma for the finite automata. We observe that if the LBA enters the same configuration twice, then it will do this again and again and again. It is stuck in a loop. The theorem follows from this. We only need to simulate and observe the LBA for k into n into s power n steps. If it's not halted by then, it must be in a loop and will never halt. The emptiness problem is unsolvable for linear bounded automata. Note that if a Turing machine accepts no input, then it does not have any valid halting configurations. Thus, the linear bounded automaton which accepts the Turing machine's valid halting computation accepts nothing. This means that if you could solve the emptiness problem for the linear bounded automata, then we can do it for the Turing machines also. In treatment of formal languages, we shall prove that the class of sets accepted by the LBA properly contains the class of sets accepted by push-down machines. This places the class in hierarchy of classes of sets computable by various machine models we have been examining. Nobody knows if a non-deterministic linear bounded automata are more powerful than ordinary ones. Linear bounded automata are acceptors for the class of context-sensitive languages. The only restriction placed on grammars for such languages is that no production maps a string to a shorter string. Thus, no derivation of a string in a context-sensitive language can contain a sentential form longer than the string itself. Since there is a one-to-one correspondence between linear bounded automata and such grammars, no more tape than the occupied by the original string is necessary for the string to be recognized by the automaton.
Before discussing about the decidability and undecidability problems, let's see about the Church-Turing thesis. As stated by Kleene, every effectively calculable function is generally recursive. All of these statements which I am going to tell now are implied by the Church-Turing thesis. We can model any mechanical computer with a Turing machine. Any mechanical computation can be performed by a Turing machine. There is some Turing machine corresponding to every computable problem. The set of languages that can be decided by a Turing machine is identical to the set of languages that can be decided by any mechanical computing machine. If there is no Turing machine that decides a problem P, there is no algorithm that solves problem P. Now let's see what is a problem. Having understood what a method is and how to represent it, let us now move on to understanding what problems are. All of us know what a problem is, but when we want to make statements that apply to all problems, we need to be very precise. A problem is a question which asks for an yes or no answer. The entity comes from a domain of possible entities, usually infinite in number. The problem has an answer for any entity in the domain. If the domain of entities is infinite, then we have infinite instances of the problem. We restrict ourselves to problems which have countable number of instances. So each instance can be represented by a string over a finite alphabet. A problem therefore can be defined as a set of all instances and their yes or no answers. Many general problems can be cast into the form above. Are there any problems which cannot? Surely, any problem which asks question about real numbers cannot be cast into this form, because given any real number, there may be no way to represent it finitely. The number of problem instances are countable. However, we can show that even in restricted class of problems, there are some which no method can solve. Before going to undecidable problems, now let us discuss about the decidable problems. A decision problem is an arbitrary yes or no question on an infinite set of inputs. Because of this, it is traditional to define the decision problem equivalently as the set of inputs for which the problem returns yes. These inputs can be natural numbers but may also be the values of some other kind, such as strings over the binary alphabet or over some other finite set of symbols. The subset of strings for which the problem returns yes is a formal language, and often decision problems are defined in this way as formal languages. A decision problem A is called decidable or effectively solvable if A is a recursive set. A problem is called partially decidable, semi-decidable, solvable or provable if A is a recursively enumerable set. Problems that are not decidable are called undecidable. Decision problems can be ordered according to many-one reducibility and related feasible reductions such as polynomial time reductions. A decision problem is said to be complete for a set of decision problems S if P is a member of S and every problem in S can be reduced to P. Complete decision problems are used in computational complexity to characterize complexity class. Complete decision problems are used in computational complexity to characterize complexity classes of decision problems. For example, Boolean satisfiability problem is complete for the class NP of decision problems under polynomial time reducibility. Now let us discuss about the undecidability problems. A decision problem that admits no algorithmic solution is said to be undecidable. No undecidable problem can ever be solved by a computer or computer program of any kind. In particular, there is no Turing machine to solve any undecidable problem. We have not said that undecidable means we don't know a solution today but might find one tomorrow. It means we can never find an algorithm for the problem. It is not obvious how to show no solution can exist. We can do so by constructing a logical paradox. Once we have seen one problem that is undecidable, it is often easy to show that other similar problems must also be undecidable. Is the halting problem decidable? It is important that we pose the problem with respect to any program, not the handful of programs we know. By Church thesis, it doesn't matter which machine model we assume or what language we use to write the program. That is there a program that takes two inputs and stops with the answer yes if P halts on input D, or stops with the answer no if P halts on input D? If we had such a program, we could use it to check for infinite loops in the program. Unfortunately, no such program exists. The halting program is undecidable. Now let us see an example. Recall that a problem is nothing more than the set of all instances and their answers. The number of instances is at most countable, that is, it corresponds to the number of integers. The number of problems is then the number of ways of assigning yes or no to each integer. Following the same Cantor's diagonal slash method, it can be shown that the number is uncountable. Assume that there are number of problems can be in one-to-one correspondence with positive integers. Let us try to list all the possible programs. From the above table, consider the entries in the diagonal elements marked red. This corresponds to a problem yes, no, yes. Now invert this problem, that is, make all yeses as no's and all no's as yes. We get a new problem, no, yes, no. Clearly, this problem cannot be the first in the list since it differs in the first entry. It cannot be the second as it differs in the second entry, and so on. Thus, this problem is not there in the list. Hence, there are more problems than there are positive integers. Clearly, we see here the same character as we saw for real numbers. Thus, the number of problems is uncountable. Recall that the number of Turing machines is countable since each Turing machine can be represented finitely. Also, each Turing machine recognizes only one language, which is the set of strings for which it halts in a final state. Thus, each Turing machine can solve at most one problem. This leads us to the conclusion that there must be some problems which no Turing machine can solve. Since the number of problems corresponds to the number of real numbers, which is much greater than the number of integers, it follows that there are much more undecidable problems than decidable ones. The fact that the number of problems is uncountable means that there are no way to represent all problems finitely, but perhaps those problems can be represented finitely or are undecidable. Unfortunately, this is not true, as can be seen in the next section. Some problems that can be stated in a very simple way are undecidable, but maybe for those problems that can be represented finitely, we can at least find out whether they are decidable or not. To continue the discussion, we need a way of representing problems. Since a problem is a set of its instances, it can be represented by enumerating solutions to all instances. In this case, the problem is of course decidable. Another way of representing a problem is to give a rule to compute its solution when given an instance of it. The most general way of starting a rule is to provide a Turing machine that encodes the rule. Further, every Turing machine represents some rule and hence some problem. Thus, for every finitely representable problem, there is a Turing machine, and every Turing machine represents some problem. Then the task of determining whether a problem is decidable or not reduces to determining whether the corresponding Turing machine will halt for all instances of the problem or not. The next section shows that this cannot be done in general. Hence, there can be no method which can determine all the problems whether it is decidable or not.